Welcome, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the What Works series, where you get practical advice from Eckerson Group Consultants. So we do this just about every other Friday from February through May. This is our second to last episode. And it's with Josh Reid, our senior consultant specializing in data literacy, among other things. If you've missed the other episodes in this series, they are available on replay. Look for the email from us. They're also up on YouTube. Next May 3rd is our next and last episode where Carlos Bossi will be joining us to talk about data zones for all consumers. Just a little bit about us. Eckerson Group specializes in data and analytics. That's all we do. We are a research and consulting firm. Our consultants, though, all have 25 years of experience in this field as practitioners or consultants. One thing that differentiates us is that we do a lot of strategy work, not much implementation. And when we do strategy, we deliver actionable data strategies or implementation plans. We also create bespoke solutions for clients. Given our years of experience, we know how to take our knowledge and apply it in a very unique and tailored way to your organization. And some people call us the consultant's consultant because of our research has been out far and wide, and many consultants rely on it to learn how to deliver services to their clients. So we're especially proud of that fact. These are our senior guys, over 200 years of combined data and analytics experience. As I said, we do a lot of work on data strategies, and within that, or on their own, we do a lot of modernizing data architectures, data governance, help companies develop robust operating models, data literacy programs, as we'll learn about today, self-service analytics programs, data science, and data ops. Those are our main practice areas. And these are some of our clients. As you can see, large, small, brand name and not, US and non-US. And if you are interested in hearing from us and hearing how we might be able to help you, please give us a call. And as a special offer, Josh, our data literacy expert, has agreed that if you're one of the first 3 people to request a 30-minute call with Josh, we will schedule that and set that up for you. Just put that into the chat, that request. So without further ado, Josh Reid has over 25 years of experience in data analytics and development. He is a data governance thought leader and coach. Recent clients that he has served here at Eckerson Group are NBME, Service, TD Bank, Kellogg, Ontario Security Commission. And personal note, Josh is an avid motorcyclist. So if you like to ride a hog, please sign up for that free chat in the chat session. All right, Josh, it's all yours.
Right on. Thanks, Wayne. So with Data Literacy 2.0, it really is the second part of my framework. I wanted to have a quick recap on the first session for those that may be a little bit rusty or it's been a while since we've met. There's a lot of components of data literacy program. It's a lot more than your standard people, process, and technology. It really is a collection of skills that bleeds into data governance. It's also an organizational and individual skill set. It's not just about the person being taught data literacy, but it's also about the change impacts of an organization becoming more data literate and what that means for the organization. From an execution perspective, it can be hard to execute, and it can also be hard to be a participant. If you think about what it's like to learn at work, people who are participating feel the pressure of learning a new language, especially if it's something new like data governance or a data governance capability. It isn't a natural thing that they learned in school, or it's something new that they're not used to. So they definitely feel the pressure, and it's important to understand that and give people the time that they need to learn. And true data literacy is the ability to understand, find meaning, interpret, and communicate using data. It's not a project similar to data governance. It's a culture shift.
Yeah. So Josh, I have a question. So This true data literacy, I like that term. You say ability to understand, find meaning, interpret, and communicate using data. That's a lot. And I'm wondering, in your experience, which of those do you think users have the most trouble with?
I would say it's a combination of understand and find meaning. Those are really closely related. You really have to know the business processes to understand and find meaning in information. And it's really easy to miss nuances in data when you're doing data analysis.
Yeah, so it's not so much about the tooling, and that's usually what our training covers, is how do you use this tool.
That's right.
It's really about how do you apply this tool to the data to understand what story that data is telling you. And
Yeah.
that's not easy. That takes, I don't know, can that even be taught in a course?
So
In
that
a-
gets it. I think that gets into a little bit of knowledge management.
Yeah.
I think it has to be. I think people have to understand business processes, and if your business processes aren't documented, then we can't train you on them. So we start to get into other worlds really quickly with data literacy.
So it's almost as if you need a couple of years under your belt at an organization so that you gain that domain knowledge, so that when you're presented with a data literacy course or training material, you can connect the dots pretty quickly.
That's absolutely correct.
Okay, good. So folks, we will do this. We will stop after Josh has presented a slide, and we will have a conversation. And I don't want to hog all the time. So if you do have comments and you want to share something that you know, have learned, or you have a question, please insert it into the Q&A tab, and we'll bring you into the conversation. That's what makes this fun. Okay, so let's go to the next slide.
This is also a recap slide. This is the last one, I promise. I really want to drive home the fact that there's a data strategy dependency on data literacy. If you're in the process of defining or executing a data strategy, don't forget about data literacy and make sure you fold that into your plans. From a reporting and analytics perspective, data literacy is really important to help users understand how to get the most out of the tools that they have. From a data platform perspective and a data strategy, data literacy helps leaders understand how to choose a platform. There's a lot of new technology out there. There's a lot of new tools out there, and it changes almost daily. Leaders need to have the data literacy required to make the right decision for their organization. And of course, on that note, IT teams need the skills that they need to build and manage the data platform based on that decision. So data literacy comes into play definitely on the very technical side. In the data governance world, anyone who uses data needs to understand how it's governed. So if you have sensitive information, are you managing it correctly? There's a lot of literacy that has to happen to make sure people handle sensitive and private information correctly. From a data management perspective, everyone needs to know how to manage data in their day-to-day business. It goes beyond privacy and sensitivity, but getting into data quality management, getting into metadata management. Projects need to build data management into their solutions. So it's now getting into the space where we're defining governance by design or data management by design, where there are actually data management tasks inside of the project delivery lifecycle. And last but not least, in data products, so we're seeing more and more data products every day. Leaders need to understand the art of the possible when it comes to what can you build in a data product. And without proper data literacy, you won't know what's possible. You might not know all the data available to you in the organization. You might not be familiar with what the platforms can do. These are data literacy problems to solve.
So Josh, I really like this slide because when I first encountered data literacy, I thought it was really just that first circle on the left, reporting and analytics,
Right.
helping users understand what they're seeing in a report or a dashboard, being able to manipulate that data, drill through, drill across, and come up with some insight or answer that's accurate and factual. But what you're presenting here is a much broader sense of the need for and the power of data literacy. It really infiltrates everything that we do in the data and analytics space. So it's not just for the business user who's looking at a report, It's for the IT person who's managing the platform, or the data steward who's governing processes, right? Or the product manager who's building and defining data products. So every aspect, every role is touched by a data literacy program, which makes it a little bit daunting, don't you think?
They are hard to execute. And that's one of the reasons why I'm here today, is to try to make it simpler for folks.
Great. All right, folks, again, if you want to insert a question or a comment, please do, and we'll bring you in. Okay.
So I wanted to start today's session off with how to integrate data literacy into data governance. There's a lot of data governance people will probably be tasked with implementing data literacy, but how do you bring the two together? There's an art to it. I wanted to make sure we covered this off. When you think about data governance, you often think about people, process, technology, policy, organization, and standards. So that's how I've organized the response. On the people side, data literacy should have its own working group or community of practice, depending on the terminology that your organization uses. And that should be headed and led by the data governance folks. From a process perspective, data literacy should be embedded in employee development plans and change programs. So you have really two paths here: working with human resources to make sure that they're aware of your data literacy program and make sure it links into employee development plans. And also on the project management, program management side, make sure that when there's a program of change coming in, data literacy is part of that change. And there is the right training at the right time for the right people. It's part of that process. From a technology perspective, internal learning management systems, or LMSs, and external learning tools are the systems. So there's a lot of delivery methods for data literacy, and we'll get into that a little bit later in today's presentation. But there is definitely a technology aspect to data literacy. If you didn't think about it, it's definitely there. From a policy perspective, data literacy is a great vehicle to train and test the knowledge of all employees on data governance policies and processes. It's usually where data governance people start their data literacy program, is actually training folks on policy. From an organization perspective, data literacy standing topics and data governance council helps bring the awareness up. Leveraging the data governance council helps bring the right people in the right room together and make sure people are aware of all the work that's going on, and making sure that there's top-down support of the work. That gets you ongoing funding, because sometimes the data literacy program will cost money. Maybe you want to make a custom course, and maybe you want to do some video recording. Maybe you want to bring in a third party to act as a teacher and do a class. That does require funding. And last, we have standards. So there are standards in data literacy, and those are your data literacy subject areas. And I don't have it here, but I would definitely say that the personas that you use become standards as well. You can use a data governance approach on people, process, technology, policy, organization, and standards to drive your data literacy program.
Okay, lots of questions here that I have. So are you arguing then that the literacy program and what should be probably a literacy coordinator, because it's a big job, reports into the data governance organization, or they're not, or like directly to the CDO or head of data management?
I would say it's in the world of the CDO for sure.
Okay.
And I have been seeing it mostly in the data governance group. Now, there is definitely an argument for putting it more into the execution side, so closer to that change management group. But because it is data literacy, not change management literacy, I prefer to see it in the data governance team.
Okay. Fair enough. COP, you mentioned, that was the first thing you mentioned, community of practice. What does that look like for data literacy? I'm having trouble envisioning that.
So in the world of data literacy, that's a great question, Wayne. In the world of data literacy, you have subjects and topics that you want people to be trained on. Ultimately, for those subjects and topics, as you mature, you should be identifying mentors. And those mentors can come together to the community of practice where you start to provide feedback to the training, to the exercises. So that gives the opportunity for the mentors to communicate into the person leading the program. And that becomes a continuous improvement loop. That is your community of practice.
Okay, fair enough. All right, you mentioned human resources. In your experience, how hard or easy is it to coordinate with HR to bring data literacy into, job descriptions and evaluation forms and things like that?
In my experience, HR has been very welcoming. I didn't mention it, but there's also some work with corporate communications sometimes, depending on who manages creating new LMS material. Sometimes corporate communications is charged with that instead of HR. But to bring forward a structured approach to training people is always welcomed, especially when it comes down to, quite frankly, a lot of employees find it hard to create their own development plans. In a data literacy program, we're saying, here's what you need to learn. That is actually solving some problems that some companies face today.
Yeah, and that actually raises an interesting question, which is I've seen where some groups, like typically more power users or data scientists, maybe developers, they want to like develop their own custom. I don't know if you would call it training or data literacy. It's more like maybe career advancement, curriculum. These are the courses I want to take to advance my skill set going forward. Do you think that plays a role in data literacy, or is that kind of more career advancement?
I would really pay attention to those kind of requests, because if one person is asking for that training, it's possible that more than one person needs it.
Okay.
So that's a great point of entry for the community practice feedback. That's a great opportunity for the data literacy program to grow.
Great.
Okay, now that we've talked a little bit about how to integrate your data literacy program into your data governance program, we want to jump right into selecting personas. So personas are a very important part of the data literacy program. I had mentioned earlier that the programs can come off as being very complex and very big, and personas is one way to help control the scope of your program. If you really think about it from a scope perspective, personas help us build a literacy program to a type of individual or a role rather than all of the people that are in your company. And that really helps to narrow things down and simplify. So personas represent a participant who will receive the training, coaching, and mentorship. And selecting personas, besides being scope, will have a direct impact to how long it takes you to bring everything together. What I wanted to talk about is, if you haven't built a persona before, what I like to do is have a typical bio that describes the kind of person, what their motivations are, what their frustrations are. And the frustrations really helps to identify in future steps the kind of training that you have to build for your data literacy program. So you should see a direct link between the frustrations and the data literacy requirements.
Yeah, we like to call them pain points.
Points, yeah.
Working with clients. When we get on the phone with clients, we're doing a whole set of interviews this week. It's kind of a venting session, right?
Yeah,
Users
sure.
are so frustrated with using data that they jump at the chance to talk to people about it.
And it's those frustrations that really drive the data literacy program. And you start to see benefits right into the data strategy. If you list those frustrations out thoroughly, you really start to see I'm jumping ahead in slides, but you really start to see that business case of the value of data literacy.
Yeah. Now, putting these together from a blank page is probably a little bit daunting. And I'll go to the next slide. We've already done this and see for a lot of these roles. So when you get the slides, we essentially have given you a template to work from.
Well, I wanted to talk about the most common personas that I come across. And these are them. And I didn't give you the full 8.5 by 11 sheet on each one, but I gave you the general idea of their strengths and weaknesses. The data governor is the one that I always start with. I don't know why. Maybe might be my data governance preference. But there's a lot of layers inside the data governor. I wanted to point out you could have an executive data steward, a manager data steward, and then your plain old operational data steward. I put all of those people, all those roles into one persona because I can organize the training appropriately to cover those roles. But this really helps to simplify how big the data governance program is. You might have lots of different kind of analysts. For example, I only put in one data analyst persona. Again, to simplify, I recognize that there's lots of different kind of analysts, but one of the things that most analysts do is they act as a data analyst. So let's focus on that. Then we get into the BI developer, the data scientist, and the data consumer. Those three people are the ones working with data possibly the most. They get their hands dirty with it. And the data engineer and data architect, they're the ones making sure that the data scientist, BI developer, and data consumer are set up for success and their queries run quickly and they can find the information that they're after. So every company is different. I recognize that. But if there were a collection of common ones, these would be the 7.
Yeah, so it's interesting because I've had kind of a user classification for decades now.
Yep.
And I don't ever include the IT folks, the data engineer, data architect, or BI developer in that schema. So I'm just looking at business users. And in that, I have 2 major classifications. I call them casual users and power users. And you've got the 2 power user roles that I usually use, data analyst and data scientist. On the casual user side, I think there's a big demarcation between data consumers. So I call like 60% of your users are just data consumers, but 30% are what I would call data explorers. So that is a role that I would add here. And the explorer is simply a consumer who actually does want to drill down into the data a little bit more and maybe even create something from what already exists. Whereas a data analyst is someone who's hired and paid to crunch data day in and day out, and they should be able to create anything from scratch. But yes, as Josh says, every company's different. And I think this is the first thing that you ought to do when you arrive at a company or you take charge as a manager or a director or a leader, is know your users. Because until you do that, until you know who you're trying to serve, you can't serve any of them.
Yep, the benefits here are great. I think calling out personas goes far beyond the data literacy program. They can be reused for the data strategy. They can be reused for user experiences. They can be reused in HR. I think a lot of people will benefit and find value out of having personas built.
Yep.
I always go back to the business case. It's always about the money, Wayne. So I wanted to make sure that I showed folks that, if you're having a hard time defining your case for a data literacy program, this is a very powerful way to do it. List out your personas, identify the current state, what it's like to be in that persona today. Think about the frustrations, think about what's going well. Talk about what changes once that persona has gone through the data literacy program, and then identify your target state. And the target state here is really powerful. Not only does it help build your case and start to paint the picture of how life is going to get better for a data consumer versus what it's like today, but it starts to lead into the kind of corporate change, organizational transformation that the company is going to go through because of the data literacy program. There is an individual and a big picture organization impact to data literacy, and I can't emphasize that enough.
Yeah, so this target state really gets at the value that an organization gets once it's achieved that cultural transformation to a data-driven business, right?
Yeah, we got a question.
All right. Yes, you're right. Connie asked, do you see a need for new personas with vendors making it easier for business people to explore and analyze data without having to be too technical? Perhaps it's Wayne's power user. Yeah, probably my data explorer. That's the role that I thought I would add.
Yeah, we're seeing lots of data explorers, especially with wheel and pinion model, where you have a compressed data BI team that's very specialized with analysts providing information, making it easier to consume to all the business units. That's where those power users, as you say, Connie, come in. And depending on the tool that you have, whether it's Power BI, Tableau, or something else, having that training and that support and that mentor in place is really, really important.
So, one thing I see time and again at our different clients is that we talk to users who are really actively involved in the data, and the BI team or the data team that has hired us typically says that calls this person a power user. But when we talk to that person, they're really more of a business user who has had to get their hands dirty with data because they can't get what they need otherwise. And when you really press them, what they really want is kind of a interactive dashboard that's highly tailored to answer the questions that they have, day after day, week after week. So they're really not a power user. They're a power user by default because the data is not available to them. What they want to be is a data explorer that just receives a packet of information in a format that they want, dashboard report, in a manner they can use. That's an interesting thing that we notice all the time. Here's another question. Hi there, thanks for this. Do you see any use and efficiency in setting up data personas for executives?
I would definitely say executives are part of the data consumer persona.
Yeah, I would agree.
And that's how you can see how I'm really narrowing the scope and controlling the scope of the data literacy program by not having every role covered in the company.
Yep. Okay, good questions.
Very good questions. Now we're getting into actually doing it. So you've got your personas created. It's time to select participants. Scope can't emphasize that enough. Scope is really important. Manage your scope as you're going through your data literacy program. Maybe you start with executives, directors, and managers. Maybe you start with analysts and engineers. Maybe you start with a specific business unit, but start small and grow it over time. There's a lot of work involved in building out the program. As if you were at the last session, you've seen all the capabilities involved. A lot of work. So just manage your scope. So you start off by identifying your target roles and groups. Then you move on to identifying and prioritizing target individuals. So who in those groups will benefit from the data literacy program the most is the way I would recommend it. How can we quickly and easily provide the learning material that they need?
So, Josh, you have a lot of roles up there in the first row: executives, directors, and managers, analysts, and engineers. How many roles should you tackle in your first iteration? And I assume that first iteration is going to be kind of more of a prototype, right? To see if any of this works, and maybe just select one business unit as you.
I would select one group, maybe a group of executives and directors who need common training. Maybe there's some analysts that need some extra skills in Power BI. I would focus on solving a problem, not trying to solve for world hunger all in one go.
Yeah, good advice. Another question here. Does the general data maturity of the organization guide you where to start with education? Good question.
I would say it can, but it doesn't necessarily have to. So if you want to, for example, mature in the handling of sensitive information, well, that's actually a very narrow topic. One or two training courses would probably cover it. That would be training that you would probably deliver to everybody in the company. So if you want to raise the maturity across the organization where everybody gets the same training, fair, I would definitely pilot that training with a small group before you go big, getting back to my controlling your scope emphasis. But the maturity of data in an organization goes by capability. So it really depends on what you want to teach them and how many people you want to teach.
Yeah, this raises an interesting question because when we go in and help companies build a roadmap, and talk to a lot of business people, we quickly see that there's a mismatch between the terms that people use to describe things. And we then say, oh, you guys need a little bit of a workshop. So, on the fly, we create maybe a 30 or 45-minute workshop to essentially just define basic terms. What is a data warehouse? What is business intelligence? What is ad hoc reporting, right? Because if people are misusing or have different definitions for those things, they're talking at cross purposes. Same thing with their definition of metrics, right? And that's a huge data governance issue, is defining terms and metrics. And that's probably part of that as well. And that's general education, I think, for everyone across the board as well. Would you agree, Josh?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So maybe that's like 101 in your curriculum, or maybe even 000. I don't know.
It might be. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So now we have our personas selected, we've got our individuals selected and prioritized, we've got our scope managed, and it's time to figure out, okay, where is everybody at? Like, do we even need training? It's a really important question. And participant literacy evaluations are the next step. There's two ways that you can complete these, and your culture and the topic is really going to impact which way you approach it. Either you'll do a self-evaluation and let people be honest, or do knowledge and experience tests. It's been my experience that on the softer skills, self-evaluation is the way to go. So you have questions like, on a scale of 1 to 10, how familiar are you with data quality management? Are you able to classify the sensitivity of data? And on a scale of 1 to 10, how are your skills with Power BI? But on the more technical skills, very often I see that they are more technical, experience-based tests, where in the same topics you'd have questions like, what are 3 examples of data quality dimensions? Or what are the 4 levels of data sensitivity in your company? Or what is DAX? These are the things that technical people get tested on, and that's just the way it is. If you really know this stuff, then you should be able to answer it. And if you don't know this stuff, then we'll know by your literacy evaluation, and that'll tell us where to start your training.
So when you say experience test, is that like more of a hands-on test?
Hands-on test, yeah.
So not just explaining what DAX is, but actually maybe writing some DAX code?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
Now that everybody's tested, it's time to plan their data literacy journey. And this is a bit of processy. I couldn't fit it in a columns and rows process, so I organized it like this. If I'm in the mindset, if I put myself in the mindset of a participant, the questions that I'm going to have are, where am I today? So that should have been covered off by the test that I just wrote. Where do I want to go? So that's a conversation with my boss, and also part of the data literacy program based on my role and my persona. And how do I get there? The how do I get there is the biggest question. How do I get there is through goal setting, learning resources, and a learning and development plan. So in goal setting, we prioritize the data literacy gaps, we refine the data literacy gaps, and we put things in order. Let's prioritize the work and set targets. Identify which of the gaps will be closed and narrowed, and let's build a realistic 6 to 12 month plan. You have to realize that people have work to do, jobs to maintain. A data literacy program doesn't just happen overnight. When it's time to pick the learning resources, this is where you start to pick in-person and online classes, certification, vendor training, continuing education to meet the goal setting needs. This is also where you assign coaches and mentors and give that person exposure to projects that will provide them with new hands-on experience. That's really important. The first one is really easy to do. It's easy to assign a person a class or course. Actually embedding that data literacy program into their day-to-day work with coaches and mentors and projects is a really big key to success. On the learning and development plan, set SMART objectives. So this is where we can work with HR to make sure that there's a proper development plan and they get credit for the hard work that they're involved in. And the last one, it sounds easy. Execute. I just say it with one word. Execute, monitor, and report on progress. Reporting on progress is really important. Keeping that communication with the participant is really, really important.
So Josh, when we reviewed these slides last week, we talked about SMART, right? And what that stood for. And you couldn't remember what S was. That's the only one I remember, which is specific.
So it's specific, measurable. A is attainable, realistic, and timely.
So when I'm looking at this, there's like a hell of a lot of information to track, especially if you have a large organization. So I'm wondering if you've seen any tools out there to help people track this. It's like you need a little data mart and an application. How do most companies do this? Because I haven't seen anything like that, but maybe you have.
So that's one of the reasons why I say bring in HR. Because HR learning development, when you have an HR platform, you have a performance side to that platform. And you can actually use the HR system to track all of this.
That makes sense. Yeah. Question from Connie is, how long does the test tend to take, and how easy is it to get people to take part? Good question. Do you give them a time frame within which to do the test to make it easier for them to take part?
Yeah, I usually give them 1 or 2 weeks to write the test, but there's a communication meeting ahead of time. You sit down either with HR and the manager and the lead on the data literacy program and say, you've been selected. This is exciting. This is to help you in the organization, but we need to know where to start. And everybody starts at a different spot. There's no pressure. We're not your pay isn't assessed. This is not a performance assessment. This is just figuring out where your starting point is to make sure we get it right and tailored to you. So the messaging is really important. It gets a little sensitive. You have to make sure you sit down and say, hey, you're going to be tested, but it's not going to be a reflection of your performance. It's actually part of your development program.
Excellent. There we go. One of my favorite slides of yours.
Yeah, this is great. This is a great way to show how you can develop curriculum by persona. So the personas are across the top, and subject matter on the left. That is the training topics. And then you have levels of classes, or you have MVPs. In this example, we have minimal valuable product. So launch phases of the data literacy program. You can see during the 101 program, we're training everybody in data fundamentals. And then data consumers and data governors are getting the bulk of the training to start with. You can see how this program is working. MVP2, we're starting to work on data explorers. And then a lot of people get some training in data analysis and on BI analytics tools. And then in the third MVP, in the 301, the domain knowledge becomes key. We start with the academic stuff, and now we get into domain knowledge. So this is a great and easy way to show how your program is going to be run. And it also shows how to keep scope at a reasonable level.
Yeah, how to roll it out with the 101, 201, 301. That's what those refer to as, right? Is your launch of those courses.
That's right.
Okay. So I see you added Data Explorer in here, or maybe I had a hand in creating this curriculum, which is why I like it so much. Okay.
I wanted to give an example of what training looks like, and because I'm a big fan of the data governor, I focus this on data stewardship. So level 101 onboarding would be roles and concepts, and that really relates to the policy of the information program. Compliance requirements, so what does good look like, and collaboration and communication. A lot of people wonder why teach a data steward collaboration and communication? Well, it's because that role requires a whole lot of collaboration and communication. And giving that person some extra skills will definitely help your program out. So it's very likely that for the first two, you'll build those courses in-house, but you could bring somebody in third party to handle collaboration and communication training. And the level 201 training starts to jump right into each data capability. So training on data catalog and data lineage. So maybe you've bought a metadata tool and you use the vendor to train the person up on how to use that tool. Data classification goes back to policy instruments. So making sure that they know how to classify data correctly was probably something you build in-house. Building out a data dictionary, again, is possibly you'd be able to use the training provided by your metadata vendor. While data security and access controls is probably training built outside of the data governance team and data literacy teams, probably built by the group within the security department. They'll probably want to design and develop all of that. So that shows exactly how you can bring other teams into your data literacy program. Data quality management, you might be running data quality manually. In that case, you'd probably be building your training in-house. But if you buy a data quality management tool, you can probably use the vendor's training to train everybody up. And reference and master data management, that's a massive area where you need a tremendous amount of knowledge about the organization. You may have a tool to handle the tool side of it, but there will still be knowledge of your organization that the training is going to be required on. And last but not least, any other data governance tools that you've made available. So as you can see, just being identified a data steward means you've got quite a few courses to go through. There is definitely a learning path, and there is definitely value at the end of it.
So Josh, when you say build this in-house, if someone told me I'll go build this course, I'd be a little bit flummoxed. It's like, okay, where do I start? Do I do this in like PowerPoint? Because that's how I've taught courses, but they're not literacy courses, right? Or do I guess maybe I'd go to human resources and see if they have a learning management system, if that would make sense for me to use to build out this material. And then of course, if I'm a manager director, I don't have a lot of time to do this. So who's actually going to do it?
So that's where your community of practice comes in, identifying the experts and getting people to be voluntold or volunteer, depending on how the topic works, to write up the material.
And do you see most people using a learning management system or PowerPoint or some other
I always see a mix. I would say that for the courses that are going to go out to a lot of people in the organization, it's worth the investment of building out a proper course in a learning management system. For courses that are going to be very targeted to a handful of people, maybe a voiceover recording and a PowerPoint presentation will be good enough for that one. So I would definitely look at everything like a business case and make sure you're matching the investment to the value that you're going to get out of that training.
Okay. I don't see any other questions in the queue. I know folks out there, you probably have done this and have some experience. If you want to share, that would be great. I'm going to go through the last two slides, but if you want to contribute something now, we'll come back to it before we end.
We got something in the chat. You want to cover that off, Wayne?
Oh, a chat question. Okay. Thoughts on AI's role in data acumen? Training based on needs and changing requirements. Is data acumen slowly moving to AI acumen? In other words, is Gen AI going to de-brain us, require us not to use as much of our brain?
Yeah, I would say AI is right now where AI is at. It's a great way to help us, but we still need to know. It's not at the state where we can trust it for 100%. But that's a personal opinion, though.
Yeah, it's certainly in our area. It's certainly a great productivity enhancer right now.
Definitely, yeah.
It's also a great way to learn how to do something that you have no experience, and that, in some ways, it could be a good educational tool in that way. So I'm a new data steward. I haven't taken the training yet, but I'm kind of been thrown into the fire, and I've got to do stuff. I got to learn what compliance requirements are. So maybe I use ChatGPT to understand what they are. I don't know.
That's a great example. So every organization is going to have their own compliance requirements, and I don't think ChatGPT is going to know the answer of, does company ABC, is it applicable to regulation 123? I don't think ChatGPT will help with that.
Well, that actually is the first place most companies are going to implement Gen AI, is to run it against their own internal documentation, so that employees can ask questions of their own internal data, document data, essentially. Right?
That's a great knowledge management tool. Definitely a great knowledge management tool.
Yeah. So, Mark, thanks for that question. As we started thinking through it, I think there is something to what you asked there. I think it will be a great assist in helping users get up to speed on these data literacy issues and
Absolutely.
topics. Yeah. And it got 2 thumbs up too. So other people agree with that. So again, folks, this is the What Works series, where our consultants provide upfront impersonal advice on key issues that every organization has. In 2 weeks, we'll hear again from Carlos Bossi. He's going to talk about the medallion architecture and the zones that he typically builds when he's developing a new modern data architecture in the cloud. So I know that's a popular one, so I hope to see you there. And any more questions, Josh?
Yeah, we've got one more from Connie.
Okay. Do you do any checks afterwards to check the training has landed and people are able to apply the skills they've learned?
Yes, absolutely. So in the first part of this 2-part series, I went through the process, and every time you start a new run or a new phase in your literacy program, you do a pilot and you check, you get feedback. And then once the pilot is done and you go big and you launch your literacy program, you always have a check at the end of training for everyone who attends to get feedback every darn time.
Yeah, because we don't want to just go through this process and not show anything for it, right? Not have any gains made. So that's a very important question. So thank you, Connie. And if anybody wants to schedule some time with Josh, please let us know in the chat, or you can contact me or Julie afterwards, Wayne@Eckerson.com or Julie@Eckerson.com, and we'll be happy to schedule that.
Yeah, I love talking about this stuff, so you're more than welcome.
So thank you, everybody, and hope you have a great rest of your Friday and a wonderful weekend. And thank you, Josh.
My pleasure. Thank you, Wayne.